Hello, my name is Michelle, and you're listening to Profit is a Choice. We have with us today Richelle Plett, the owner of Haus and Home. Richelle specializes in custom upholstery sourcing and education, working with professional designers and homeowners to help them understand which fabrics to choose, construction methods, so that they can have a piece of furniture that's going to last them a very long time. She still also offers design consultations and project management. In our conversation today, we are really going to look behind the scenes of a business that's been around for more than 20 years. And I also want to tell you that today's conversation is a bit of a cautionary tale for what happens when maybe you push through when you shouldn't, or when you aren't looking at the numbers the way you should, or even just the story that you might tell yourself that doesn't support long-term goals. This isn't a story that's meant to bring anybody down or make you feel bad, but it's one ultimately of hope, and it's one of perseverance. You know, sometimes to go forward, we need to take a few steps back, and I think that's the lesson that we're going to hear today. I'm so thankful for Richelle for trusting me and trusting this podcast with her story. And I just invite you to listen with an open heart and an open mind to this one. And I hope that it helps you as you take stock of your own company. Every day, empowered entrepreneurs are taking ownership of their company financial health and enjoying the rewards of reduced stress and more creativity. With my background as a financial software developer, owner of multiple businesses in the interior design industry, educator, and speaker, I coach women in the interior design industry to increase their profits, regain ownership of their bottom line, and to have fun again in their business. Welcome to Profit is a Choice. Hey, Richelle, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I am so excited to talk to you. I know we spoke on the phone, I guess, a year or so ago, and follow each other on Facebook and Instagram. And I really was interested in sharing about your story and your path and your journey and your offerings with our listeners today. So thanks so much for being willing to have the conversation.
I'm so excited to be here and to share. And you're the only person I would like to talk to this about. And of course, everyone else who's listening, but I know I'm in good hands with you.
Thank you. I will do well by you today, I promise. So, Richelle, tell our listeners a little bit about when did you first start your business, and what did it look like when you started?
This has been a very long evolutionary journey. My business kind of started out of, it just kind of rolled, and I was doing it unofficially, and then I decided to get the business license and everything. I've been in the interior design business since about college, right after college. I had my own drapery workroom. I did drapes. I worked for a drapery workroom, and then I did interior design consulting out of my home for a while. I started getting official when I was kind of handed a show house project. The designer who was doing it got kicked out of the show house, and the ladies asked me if I would pick it up and finish it. And I decided then that I needed to have a business license. I needed to get moving on that. So that's how I really officially got in business and hung my plaque on the door. This last phase of my business was to open a workroom for upholstery. We see a lot of vintage furniture, which is one of my favorite things in the world, vintage upholstery, and it's so sad to see it on the curb and languishing, and I know how amazing those bones are. So I wanted to bring that to the public in a retail atmosphere. So I would pick up roadkill pieces. Those were pieces, either estate sale ones that had no value, or bulky item pickup where the bones were great, but the outside of them had to be completely stripped off anyway. And I would pick all of those up. I had a 10,000 square foot warehouse in West Bottoms, which is a warehouse district here in Kansas City. And I would line them all up, price them for the labor to restore them. That was to strip them all the way down. And I would say, here's how much it's going to cost, and here's how much fabric you're going to need. So pick a frame, then we go to the design center, pick a fabric, and then we do all the work in-house for you. And so that portion of the business, I've just wound down and closed the upholstery workroom. That was going on for over 6 years, a little over 6 years. But now I'm doing design consulting.
Okay. So we'll pick that back up in just a second, but I have to tell you, I love old pieces. So I have some roadkill pieces in my own home. I have one really great chair sitting in my family room that we went to a yard sale and she sold it for $15. Mm-hmm. And I bought it. Now I've had a drapery workroom for 16 years, but I'm not an upholsterer. That is just, I've done light upholstery, you know, little chairs and ottomans, but to redo this, it's kind of barrel back, button tufted. It was above my ability level, and just I was not going to make it beautiful by myself. So I took it to my upholsterer and had it redone and love it. And that chair is heavy. Mm-hmm. And then I have two of my great grandmother's chairs that are like club chairs. And I swear they must weigh like 75 pounds a piece because it is such hardwood. And I personally have had them redone twice. And every time the upholsterer picks them up, he says, "Miss Michelle, you know these are heavy, don't you?" I'm like, "Yes, I know they're heavy. Bring a friend." They're not one-person chairs. But the thing that I love, and I love about that idea, Richelle, is that they still matter and they have value. And they are actually more sturdy than anything new that my husband and I have purchased in the last 15 to 20 years. I mean, they are heavy duty. So I know that was probably like a really great product offering in your area, you know, and it saved things from the landfill. Like, that's a good idea.
Right. And as a designer, if you are sourcing for a client and you want to kind of look at the spectrum on pricing, yes, you can buy newer, cheaper. Yes, retail or whatever, you can buy brand new out of China, overseas, whatever, cheaper. So reupholstery is not an inexpensive venture, but it's completely 100% custom, meaning you can put whatever fabric you want to on it. And if you're following along that pricing structure, your customization of a vintage piece is a better value for your client than, and I hate to say it, ordering brand new of the very same. So if we're looking at Cedo style arm sofa, a vintage Hendredon that I priced out using a Robert Allen fabric, and they still had the same frame, me having the vintage piece redone was about, it ended up at about $2,400, whereas to buy the same piece new with the same fabric in a COM was about $3,750.
Wow.
So if you're looking at the spectrum, you know, there's opportunity for designers to make money, to customize, and everyone has a better product.
I love it. I love it. So let me ask you this. When you started at the very beginning, all the way back right out of college, starting your workroom and everything else, was profitability something that you had in mind all the way back then? Or was it more, let me learn the trade, let me provide a good product and service, and I hope the financials work out at the end? What was your kind of thought process when you started?
When I first started, I was just doing it because it was a creative expression that I had to get out, and money was such an afterthought that I just gave it away. I was just giving anything I could away for free because I was so amazed anybody was even interested in what I had to offer, that I would shudder to think how much labor, money I've just handed over.
It makes me think of Sally Field in that her acceptance speech, I think at the Oscars or whatever one time, and she's like, "You like me, you really like me." And I think it's that feeling. I call it the Sally Field feeling. We just give it away because we're so excited that they called us, that they engaged with us in some way, and that they would take a finished product or service. And I do see that quite often in creative fields. I see it in interior designers who are, I'm going to put in air quotes here, you can see me, but everybody else can't, working for their portfolio. And so they create this narrative in their head that it's okay not just to not make money, but to even lose money so they can create it. Now, if you were doing it once or twice, but they can work for years in air quotes, building their portfolio as opposed to actually doing work they got paid for. That on the workroom side, photography side, we do the same thing. We give it away out of just the clear, we are being paid with, I'm so glad that you chose to let me work for you for free. Like that's our payment, right?
Exactly. I that's exactly what I did. I was just so thrilled that anybody liked what I had to offer, that they wanted it, that, you know, here, take whatever I have. Here, take my 2 a.m. multiple nights and the blood that I've literally put into this piece. And, oh, I messed it up. And, oh, I have to buy it. I have to buy this fabric out of my own pocket. Yeah, no. Many years. I just didn't validate myself.
Right. So what was it that shifted even back then that made you realize that that was not sustainable to work like that?
I didn't put on my big girl business panties until I had employees. And even then I didn't take care of myself. I was the last person. And of course I'm the one holding the big bucket of poop, you know,
right
at the end of it. So, yeah, I'm still learning to put on my big girl business panties.
Okay. And now you told us it was outside of college. We're not going to tell your age or my age or anything like that, but we're going to say that your business has spanned 20 years or more?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
Right. So I'm just saying that for our listeners so that they know this isn't like a business within 3 to 5 years. We're talking 20 years or more, right?
Exactly. And when I say business, it's technically a business, but I would say glorified hobby for any lack of better way to put it. Have I been in the industry? Have I made money? Have I been working with clients? Absolutely, that amount of time. But have I been profitable? Oh, no. Which is why we're making some significant changes in life now. And I have over 20 years experience of wonderful experience working with clients, sourcing things. And now it's my turn to start taking care of myself and my family. And that's where things are now.
I love that. And we're going to jump into that. One of my clients calls it a jobby.
A jobby?
Oh, a jobby.
Yeah. That's cute.
Kind of like a job and a hobby. That's what her husband told her. He's like, she would say, I have a business. And she didn't want to say she had a hobby. So he just told her she had a jobby. And sadly, I do think that I would say is something that many people in the creative industries have, is a jobby.
Very true. Very, very, very true. Everyone got taken care of but me. Everyone had paychecks but me.
Let's talk about that. So what are some ways that let's say you did take care of your staff? Because you did take care of them, like you said. So they got paid, they probably got their vacation time or any kind of bonuses or whatever it was that you needed to keep them employed and happy. Right.
And my upholsterer was very, very well paid for the industry. And on top of that, overtime, and unmonitored overtime, which was probably my biggest boo-boo. But there's a lot of things that fall into play with that. But, everyone was paid well and on time and vacations. And my draw, I'm going to delve into a number here. In 4 years, I made an average of $4,800, and that includes things that I took as a draw. So if you do the math on that, $4,800 divided by 4 years, figure out the math on that. That was my car payment, anything that I needed for my family, occasional draw that I didn't bring home any money, nothing.
So $4,800.
Of course, that makes your family look at you when they see you working 7 days a week, which was retail, 7 days a week, because you had to be the one to show up, and you're working 60 hours a week, taking away from your kids' soccer games, your obligations as a mom, as a wife, and the contribution. They see you working, but they don't see the fruits of your labor. You can't take a vacation. You can't leave. You can't do anything. That creates an awful lot of resentment in your family if you're not contributing, and jealousy because you're giving everything to this something that doesn't benefit anybody.
Okay, so if I want to make sure I understand this since
Sure.
you threw a number out. You said 4,800. Is that per year?
48,000. 48,000 was my total.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Sometimes I say 1,000 and 100 in the wrong place. So I'm glad you.
Okay, so 48,000
was my take home in that amount of time.
All 4 years, which on average is 12,000 a year, which on average is 1,000 a month. And so I would say that your kids did see the fruit of your labor. It was just spoiled fruit. It was
rancid.
It was rancid, right? And I just want to stop right now because I know that there are going to be some listeners who are going to go, well, that's crazy. Why would you do that? And that's fair. But sure. I also know that I've done what you did. Part of my story is that I worked the first 2 to 3 years, and I've put it this way. I worked and busted my rear end so that I could spend the money that my husband earned and serve people who could afford what I was doing that weren't paying a fair price. And that was my fault, not theirs. This was not a client issue. It was a Michelle issue. It was a value and a worth issue. It was giving, and the payoff being the Sally Field moment as opposed to the paycheck. I remember my husband and I are high school sweethearts. And so we dated for 6.5 years before we got married. And I can remember being this young girl, stars in her eyes and little hearts floating from my head. And I was like, I'm going to marry this boy. And my dad was like, you better get a degree and get a job because you can't take your love to the grocery store and buy groceries. And when I think about that, at the time I was just like, it'll all work out. It'll all work out. But in business, it's the same kind of thing. You can't work and make nothing or take the accolades from the people who love you and love working with you. I cannot take that to my mortgage company and go, can we use this as a payoff for my house? Because my clients love me. Right. That is not a healthy exchange. So, Richelle, given that you've walked that path, I've walked that path, and I know from my coaching practice, many who are walking that path currently. What was the real cost to you and to your family? I know no vacations. You've mentioned that. I can imagine the stress for 7 days. The stress of retail is enough by itself, but now let's add 7 days worth of work. Tell me what toll it took on you, on your family, on your friendships. I mean, when do you ever have time for girlfriends, right? Or a girls' night out? What was the cost?
What did my days look like? My life. Well, in that, I've been married to my husband. We just had our 4th wedding anniversary. And so he's been with me through this entire thing, but we weren't married at the time. I took off Saturday. I closed the store for Saturday so that we could get married. We have not had a honeymoon. My first vacation, air quotes, vacation was summer market in Las Vegas. That's the first time I've been out of town for any real length of time. And I'm shaking my head. I'm thinking here, it almost cost me my marriage. I mean, really, it's relationships. I missed so many soccer games. I can't even tell you how important those things were to my daughters, and I missed them. Interactions with my husband, time with him, just all of that. Here's the one thing. Here is the one saving grace that I am absolutely grateful and thankful for, was that my mom was my seamstress. So I was incredibly blessed for 3 years. She was with us, to have her and hang with her every single day. So that had a huge amount of value. And that's the one saving grace, is that I got to be with my mama every single day.
I literally am hurting for you in this moment because I feel what you're saying. I've been to soccer games where my kids would say, Mom, did you see that? And I was too busy working while I was there. And I remember one time, one of my sons, my oldest son, he's a lot like me. I call him like the child of my head. He's a thinker. And I remember one time he said to me, Mom, it's almost better if you're not here, if you're unavailable. Because what's worse is to have you physically in front of us, but mentally and emotionally not available to us. And that rocked my world.
Yeah.
Because I was trying to make a choice to be physically there, but I was doing work. I wasn't listening. I wasn't watching. I missed the play. I wasn't in the moment. And for him, it felt like a bigger loss to have me there but not engaged than if I just was off working and out of the picture. And that, I still to this day try so hard when people talk to me about multitasking and all of this to kind of bring it back down to go, we've got to create time to be in the moment. And like you're talking about, not just physically there, mentally there, emotionally there. And so when we're working and we're overworking and we're underpaid and we're under earning, the cost is so much more than a lack of money.
Oh, it's huge, Michelle. It's huge. As you're talking about the multitasking and the physically there, but not mentally there. When I would come home and I would spend the weekends with my girls, the big joke was, well, it doesn't matter what movie we put on, Mom's going to fall asleep in it right away. So I was pushing and trying to make that time to spend with them, but I couldn't sustain it. So then on top of that, what happens is you start to feel like you're sacrificing so much that you might start doing some activities or things that are self-indulgent to fill your own well that's not healthy. Like if I'd had the money, I probably would have been a shopaholic. You know, things that if you feel such a personal deficit because you're not getting, you're getting the, oh, I like me, everybody likes me, it's awesome, it's great, but you still feel empty. So you might start overeating, you might start drinking too much, you might start shopping, you might start indulging in other addictive behaviors to fill that void that you know is there. You know it's there.
Sure.
And I know that goes down a different path, but it's an observation that if you're not taking care of yourself and you're not taking care of your family, and again, it's all about balance. And for years, I didn't do anything to balance any of that. I have way too many shoes in my closet. I will tell you that. Way too many shoes that I can't wear. So there are things you do.
There are things you do. How did your health hold up through all of this?
I'm glad you asked that. I have an autoimmune disease called Crohn's disease. And part of the reason that I went into business on my own was because I had a hard time holding down a 9-to-5 job with the regular health issues that I had. It was great having the business because I could run to the bathroom or whatever and take care of myself that way. But the stress with an autoimmune disease will put you in a flare and put you in the hospital and put you into situations that you really have to monitor your health when you have an autoimmune disease. Yeah, you really have to keep track of that. And so anytime stress would rear its ugly head, I was managing the business and a flare. And just people don't understand, especially with an autoimmune disease. You look good, you look fine. Nobody can tell what's going on because it's all going on the inside.
Right. Well, I have 3 autoimmunes, so I can completely relate to that. And, mine actually caused a whole shift back in 2012 where I had to sell a business, slow a business down. And then that's what even I would say caused me to pivot and prompted me to start a coaching firm simply because I could not physically do the workroom and do the things anymore due to my autoimmunes. And I ended up in the hospital, bypass surgery, a whole long list like you are referring to. And every single trigger of mine was stress related. And so now I know even in this new business that I have, and I say new, I'm 6 years in and I still see it as new, but I still have to consciously manage what I do, how I do it, how much effort I, extend in any given time or circumstance. It's now a necessity. And so I can so appreciate the toll that it took on your body. And if you're like me, when there's this big toll on your body from an autoimmune, it's something that you physically cannot stop, right? Mm-hmm. There's nothing outside of removing stress and medicating or doing whatever I need to do. I cannot stop my body turning on itself.
Right. Right.
And then you take the deluge, if you will, of the mental and the emotional stress of the business and trying to keep payroll and trying to keep, a brick and mortar up and running. I mean, I just feel the weight for you. It certainly, what I'm feeling can't be anything related to what you went through. But even just having this conversation with you, I feel it.
The weight?
I feel the weight.
Yeah.
I literally almost feel like I could cry in our interview. And I mean,
oh
no, but from a place of, it makes me sad because I know you're not the only one, Richelle, walking the path. That's what makes me sad. If you were completely an outlier, I would still feel empathy and sympathy towards you. But I think the part that really just puts me in a place of sadness is you're not alone. And I am seeing business after business walking down that path. And I know that's also part of why you're willing to share, the story and the rest of it. We'll say this right now. There's hope and excitement on the other side.
Oh, yes.
But in the process, it's painful, it's dark, and it's lonely. And I know that there are people that need to hear this podcast today. So tell me, what was the turning point, or was there some type of event that made you go, yeah, no more? Something's got to give. What was that point?
Well, I kept a hold of my brick and mortar about 18 months longer than I should have. And I'm stubborn like that. I really will just beat to fit, paint to match to try to make something work. So in hindsight, I kept it going about 18 months longer than it should have. The thing that was where I threw my hands up and I went, okay, yep, done, was when my mom got sick. And she hung with us, and she had a lot of different health issues, and she just couldn't manage being our seamstress anymore. So at that point, I needed to find a way to retire her because she wasn't going to do it on her own. And that was the big leading edge. And as soon as I realized I have to find some way to move her out of here, and that was the first domino falling for everything being a change. So we moved from our downtown Overland Park location to a smaller space, which had less overhead. And that was a big thing, was the overhead. Oh my goodness. And then I found an individual to take her position as the seamstress, and moved the upholsterer and seamster, it was a male, off-site, closer to him so that he could be closer to home. So we separated out the workroom from the retail. And that was step number one. And then I just really looked at the finances. I looked at everything, and I kind of felt like, okay, well, I'm throwing in the towel on this one. Let's see what else we can throw the towel in. And it almost gave me permission. Without my mom getting really sick, I don't know if I would still be, bearing white-knuckled to hold on to everything.
You downsized from 10,000 square feet to
that I had initially 10,000 square feet, and then that was in the warehouse district. The lease was over there, and my mom started showing signs of sickness and black mold disease, because where we were, it was the old building. And so I moved her and the whole business down to Old Overland Park, Kansas, which was close to home for us, more of a street retail location. And I still kept the workroom on site, but it was retail square footage as opposed to warehouse square footage. So that was astronomical in rent pricing. And it went great. It was a transition from one type of business to another. So when we moved to Old Overland Park, we did less of the roadkill model as opposed to customers bringing their own pieces in. And that was more of what we did there. So when things were changing in Old Overland Park, and my mom was starting getting really, she couldn't hold her balance. She would fall over. She had migraines every day that were just debilitating. I just said, you can't do this anymore. You cannot. So that's when I talked to my landlord. I said, we need out of this lease. We need to make some changes in our business. And he was just such a wonderful, and he is a wonderful person. So he let us out of that lease, and we got 2 locations. So Midtown Kansas City, and then the workroom moved to Independence, Missouri.
Okay. And financially, how did all of this hit you? What did it do financially? Because I can imagine, like, the top 2 costs that most of my clients have if they have a firm or employees is the overhead on the building and payroll. Those are almost historically, those are their top 2 expenses. Yes. And you still had both of those.
I still had both of those. When the payroll, I hate for this to be such a downer. The upholstery industry is quite a bit different from other workroom type industries. There are fewer upholsterers than there are seamstresses.
Yes.
There is a lack of skilled employees. So I spent 5 years trying to find more people to add to my team. So what I also realized in all of this was that my business was not scalable. I could only work based on what one team, a seam, I would pinch in and do as much as I could, but I was also doing everything else on top of that. So I couldn't actually sit down and sew because, someone would walk in the door and then I'd leave a cushion under the sewing machine. You can't do that. So you are limited to what one person or a team of people can crank out in a month. And when your overhead is higher, your profitability I could have had that business if I'd had the manpower to make it happen. We had a 120-day wait period just to get something on the bench. So it's not that there wasn't business out there. It was that there wasn't skilled trade out there to fill it. So we ended up needing to do overtime. Mm-hmm. And that meant my cost per piece was no longer manageable because the market will only bear X for reupholstery. So not only was I would end up my profitability, I was chasing around about $100, $200 profit on a sofa, which, and I air quote profit, that $200 went to rent, crazy things like insurance that you have to pay, office supplies. There was no money for marketing. It was all word of mouth. And even if I did have marketing, what good would it do? I couldn't service the people coming into me anyway.
Right. I was going to say that just shows that was gross profit. And by the time you take out company expenses out of that, as you just illustrated, there's not much at the bottom.
Left.
And, I have many clients in the workroom industry because that's the industry that, that I have been on the board of directors and served and even been partners in a school for years. Mm-hmm. And upholsterers are very hard to come, and good upholsterers are even more difficult to find. It is absolutely a dying trade. And I feel for you and understand many of the really great upholsterers are months out to get anything done. So I understand how all of that hit. Where are you today? What's happening today?
What am I doing today? As we're recording this, it is August 28th. Today's the 28th. I am out of my workroom, my studio location. The workroom's retired completely. They're gone. And I spent the last year doing just interior design work out of my downtown studio location. But, with my mom's health and just other life things going on, I couldn't sustain that retail location. So I couldn't be there. I could not physically be there all the time by myself. I just got out of the lease and I'm moving out. And the end of this month, end of August, I will now be working out of my home. And I'm hoping to have more of a laptop type life so that I can travel and take care of the family things that I need to be taken care of. Not only my mom, but my daughter was just diagnosed with an autoimmune disease as well. So it's very much hereditary. And she lives in Germany. So I would really like to be able to visit her and take care of my baby. So my goal here is a laptop life.
I love it. And you know what? It's totally doable, right? Totally doable.
I am praying so.
Yes. But I also know that you're climbing out of a hole.
I am coming out of you want me to tell the number? I can do it. After doing my taxes this year, I had a $53,000 business loss.
And what did that do to your business?
Well, it closed it. I am digging myself out of a hole. I am absolutely contemplating bankruptcy. But on that note, the things that I have that are bankruptcy, they're not necessarily dispensable. Like I have sales tax. I owe some sales tax.
Yes. And that's not one they're going to forgive you for. So we're going to need to work through that. I will say this too. I also have coached a number of clients who have been in very similar positions. Mm-hmm. I have one client in particular that when we started working together, she had an $80,000 debt that she owed. And it took us time. But in, I want to say maybe about a year and a half, we were able to climb out and get her back. You know, people talk about being cash flow positive. Our first goal was cash flow neutral.
Yeah, neutral.
Let's just get to neutral. Then we'll work on positive. You can't go from negative to positive without going through neutral. And so, you know, I think what I love too about your story is, and I know you and I had a little bit of a discussion about this before we started, Richelle. There were opportunities for you to pivot all along.
Yes, there were opportunities to pivot and change and do things better and different, but I did not.
Okay. And so you had made a comment before we started, and I want to dig into it a little bit because I think it has to do with mindset. And what you shared with me was you would see an obstacle, and in your mind, that was something to just kind of put your head down and power through, ram through. And we talked about the difference. And so I just want to chat on the podcast about it, that sometimes when like, let's say we're going down a road and there's a barrier, sometimes the barrier is stopping us because it's going to drop off a cliff right behind it. And sometimes it's just a small pothole and we just have to work our way around it. You know, there's the whole thought process that a challenge is just a new way to do. It's a time to be innovative or whatever. But sometimes that blocking is for our own protection. Talk to us a little bit about some of the blocks and the challenges and why you chose to power through and what you've learned through that experience.
Like tangible examples of that. I think probably my biggest obstacle was totally cash flow, trying to find out how to manage that. And the pivoting would have been that I probably shouldn't have taken a capital advance. You know, I kept thinking, oh, well, we just need more of this, or I need to do more of that. And it was never a matter of me scaling back to go, well, this is effective and this isn't. I did know my numbers, but I just wasn't willing to acknowledge that it wasn't scalable. I kept thinking if I offer this other service or if I offer this other thing, then that will help pay for the loss in what I loved, which was the upholstery, keeping it as a retail type scenario. Now, there are other businesses that are doing this much more successfully. There's some revitalists. There's some other people who are doing it at a smaller scale. But instead of keeping it small, like I should have, I got bigger because of that whole, oh, well, this is great. We love how this is clean and we love how we can just walk in at any time. But if I'd kept it in almost like a garage type scenario, kept my overhead down, there might have been more profitability, but I was really trying something new that at the time wasn't done. So does that answer your question? I'm not sure.
It does. And you know, you even mentioned to me that part of what you were learning through this process is that sometimes we don't need to keep plowing through, that it is okay sometimes to scale back. I have another podcast coming out with Christy Lott, who is an accountant, and I'm pretty sure hers is going to air before this one does. And, you know, she talked about building the big accounting firm, having all the employees, having the space, and then her day became personnel management and HR and all those other things. And it took her away from the pieces and parts that she loved to do. And so she just recently has sold her business, backed it down, and moved back into her home. And so I do think that is, you know, we have so many people that are thinking build, but build doesn't always mean bigger retail out of the house. We could build in a completely different way. And so you just sharing that, you didn't see scaling back, that almost looked like a step back when actually it was a step towards profitability potentially. And realizing that to get the money we want doesn't always mean we got to plow ahead. Sometimes we got to go left, and sometimes we got to take a step back.
Mm-hmm. Right. I followed too many suggestions out in the entrepreneur world about grow this, do this, market that, be this, when what I really should have spent money on was an accountant, a bookkeeper, a business coach. Instead, what I spent money on was make it pretty, find somebody who can be an assistant and do marketing. But at that time, I was paying this person for stuff that now that I don't have this person anymore, I'm looking at it going, why did I pay this salary? Why did I have this person? So if you're going to have people on your staff, two big lessons I learned: they must cover their own salary. That is absolutely vital. If they're going to be there and they are going to take an income, you need 3 times their salary to make them worth having. So if they aren't bringing in that amount of work, they're not worth it. I hate to say that, but
I don't hate to say that. I think that's a very, for the most part, I think it's a very fair statement. We have to be able to make money. Doesn't necessarily mean they're the one making it, but they have to be doing what they do in such a way that it allows every other team member to do what they do, so that there is an increase in income and,
right.
and in revenue, like real revenue, gross profit, not just in total sales, because sometimes selling more, you lose more. Like in your situation, the more you sold, in some ways, the more you lose, the more sales tax you got to pay, the more overtime you got to pay. So selling more is actually, in some cases, hurting you. I have actually had to suggest to clients, which seems so counterintuitive, I need you to slow down sales, because with every sale, you're losing more money. And we can't make it up in selling.
Right.
More. That's just not the way it works. And taking a hard look at all of those expenses, really going back to, how can I have a garage mentality on some of this, still have a product and service, so that there's money for me to be paid at the end of the day and time that I can spend with my family.
Yes. And I think for me also, there was some level of pride involved in me having an assistant. With that was, oh, well, look at me. I have grown enough that I need an assistant. But it didn't, and she came to me and she presented and said, this is what I would like to offer you I'd like to work with you, la, la, la. When you are a workroom, you get a lot of people coming at you who want to pick your brain. They want to absorb the knowledge that you have, because they want, by osmosis, they think maybe this is a career that they want. So they're like, well, let me offer to you my services and we're going to make this a win-win. And it ends up being more cost to have someone around than to actually just
do it by yourself.
They're not bringing to the table, they're bringing it down.
Right. Which is why when we hire, we have to do it with an idea towards profitability, towards, is it the right person? Am I hiring them for the right position and at the right pay? And have I done the work as the owner of the company to have a process and procedure for them to follow, so that we can actually make money? Mm-hmm. Hiring somebody when you're overwhelmed is a very difficult thing, because you're not prepared to make them successful. And so all of that ends up costing you more. So now let me ask you this. So you have started with a 10,000 square foot space, at some point you've downsized. You're now moving back into a home office even today as we are speaking, and how gracious of you to stop and talk to me on the day that your last day that you're moving out. So tell me what your plan for profitability is now, because now you have an eye to profit. You've talked about a laptop life. Tell our listeners a little bit about the restructuring that you're doing, and I would say the mindset that you have, that you are now working towards being profitable and still working within your passion, using all these years of experience that you have to enrich the lives of your clients?
Well, I will be keeping just a few select interior design clients. What I have found over this last year of being more active in social media and the interior design groups is that there are very few designers who know about upholstery and who know what I know. So where I am right now, as I'm regrouping, is I want to teach that skill. I want designers to know how to work with workrooms. I want designers to understand the value of reupholstery to help keep the upholstery industry going. And also, if they're choosing to source new custom items, how to make sure it's successful, because a lot of our designers, upholstery is an unknown. And I want to share what I understand about that. So I've developed some courses, and those are available on my website under the courses heading. And I'm currently working on trying to get them loaded for the continuing education credits. But I'd like to do some public speaking. I'd like to go and visit and teach. That's really where my focus is at the moment. I still love interior design, but education is what I'm driven by right now. Teaching this story, I'd like to share so that people don't do the same thing I did.
So in your teaching of this, what would you say would be your advice to somebody in the interior design, workroom, upholstery, in that umbrella industry of interior design? What would be 2 or 3 things that you would say to them that you have learned, biggest lessons learned from your experience, that they could, see this as a cautionary tale? They could see that maybe bigger is not always better, or it is worth it to stop and understand your financials early, or whatever it is. What would you say to them?
Well, I think the advice I would give a designer is a little bit different than the advice I would give an upholstery workroom.
So let's start with designer then. Tell me what you would tell them.
As a designer, I think I would make sure that you have your foundation and your systems in place first. So things like QuickBooks, hire a bookkeeper, but understand where that bookkeeper's job stops. They may not be the person who is in charge of actually writing the check to the state to pay for sales tax. That's an important thing to know, and ask me how I know this. They understand QuickBooks. Make sure you're on top of your numbers and always know exactly how much money you have to play with. Figure out what is giving you the best return on your investment. So say if you're sourcing lighting, what's your profit margin on lighting? What's your profit margin on wallpaper? Where are you making the biggest amount of profit? And decide how best to slice that pie and what you want to niche in. Because if you can niche and specialize in something, you're going to be able to make more money.
Totally agree with that. I know that you love the education piece, and so do I. And that was one of the big reasons that I created the Understanding Your Financials course, for that same reason, to help people get in and understand it, because it is really hard to grow if you're not looking at those numbers. I also love your comment about knowing what the bookkeeper does. I think it is super important. And it's funny, in my course, I teach the difference between an accountant and a bookkeeper. And I think unless you've had to figure it out, some people think that it's interchangeable, and that's not always the case. And knowing the division of duties, what is it that you're responsible for as the business owner? What is the bookkeeper going to do? And then now what role does the accountant play? Especially for sales tax payments and estimated payments and all those other things that have to happen. So I love that. Now, what would you say for the upholstery workroom?
Upholstery workroom? Well, I would say first, I understand your struggles and that you are overwhelmed beyond belief. I'd like to tell them you don't have to do it all on your own, and you shouldn't do it all on your own. There's only one of you who can handle the staple gun. Delegate, 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 so that you can spend your time, and you're not trying to sell the fabric. You're not trying to sell the jobs, because you can find a really great interior design student. You can find an apprentice. You can find someone who wants to sell the fabric. So find someone else to spend that 1 or 2 hours, however many hours you're spending with a walk-in client who's pulling you away from finishing a job. Find somebody else to sell the fabric. Maybe have them work on commission, a small hourly, but something that doesn't get you out of that start and stop flow. Get a bookkeeper, keep your overhead low, but find somebody else to interface and manage client management and project management. That would be my biggest suggestion that I see across the board in my professional upholstery workrooms. They're trying to do it all and known for not having great communication with their clients because they're too busy wielding a staple gun. They can't do it.
Okay, so we see the same thing on the drapery workroom side.
I believe it.
It is the exact same for a retail drapery workroom, because if you are selling, you're not sewing or stapling. And if you're sewing and stapling, you're not selling. And so there's always this division. And if you're out selling it and marketing it and doing the client interaction, you have actually limited the production that you can run through your business. So if your excellence and superpower is in stapling and sewing, you do better to be wholesale and to let the designers go out, sell the fabric, bring the pieces to you, put your head down and fabricate, and you will make your money that way. But if you're back and forth, you're changing hats, changing ideas, changing thought processes, and you are slowing down production. If that's the business that you want, it just needs to be created. I do have some businesses that are workrooms that are profitable that way. But it takes a lot of work to be wholesale and retail combined in one company.
And let me just touch on that a little bit more, because I was having this conversation a while back in the upholstery professional workroom thread that a lot of upholsterers don't want to take away their fabric lines because they look at it as an income producing. And yes, it is an income producing, but if you're only earning maybe $200 profit on a sofa project, look at where that $200 is going. You have to house those books. You have to take time to make sure that the pricing is updated on those books. You have to handle walk-in clients who are going to take an hour of your time. Then you have to receive the fabric. Then you have to inspect the fabric. You know what? If you are a wholesale to the trade only workroom, you don't have to do any of that. You can just accept a fabric, talk it through with the workroom work order like I have. That's great. Talk with your client. Make sure that everything is ready to go so there are no starts and stops. Boom, you're done. Let's talk about the welt. Let's talk about how that cushion's going to sit. Let's make all these decisions on the front end so that if you choose to work at 2 a.m. in the morning, you don't have to stop. You can just roll right through it and get it done.
So a lot of this comes down to, I don't know that there's absolutely one business model for everybody, but it certainly comes down to paying attention to the model that you've selected. And I love how you even made the comment for the interior design side. And I would say it's the exact same thing on this side, is know your profit centers. Mm-hmm. Know what brings in money and know what it costs you to bring in that money. Mm-hmm. So like you said, yes, you may be bringing in some income from a fabric sale, but what is the cost associated with that income? And is there another way to make the same amount of income with less effort? Those are the kinds of conversations that I, of course, keep trying to have and bring up, and hopefully we'll have on the podcast over and over. But it's not just put your head down and charge through, as you've learned from experience. I've learned from experience, and I'm certain that others are right now probably ramming their head against some challenging wall. And I would say, stop and really take a look. Do some analysis. Is it a wall you need to charge through, or is it one that you can break down or go around?
Right. And have a life, because it is exhausting to beat your head against that wall consistently.
It is, and it's physically draining. And we know at the end of the day, that's not going to be what we are most proud of.
No.
And in the minute, ego and pride may make us think that. But at the end of the day, that's not going to be it.
Mm-hmm. I do think the thing I'm most proud of from my experience is, and the thing that I've learned about myself is, I love working with people. So I don't know how this laptop life is going to go working from home. I'm definitely going to be missing the interaction from other people. I enjoy being on a team. I like working with a team. So we'll see how this goes. But the interactions with the clients and the stories that you hear and just those quick movements and the connections that you make. I do that. That's been the positive. I've enjoyed that a whole lot.
And you will find your team. It may end up being an online team. It may be a collaborative team, but you'll find it. I absolutely know that you will. You draw people to you, Richelle. So there's no doubt in my mind. You're fun and engaging. There's no doubt. And let's be honest, you've got a great team with a husband and 2 daughters.
Oh, no, I've got 4 daughters.
Oh, 4 daughters. Wow.
4 baby girls.
That's excellent. So see, your team just grew because I didn't even know that.
And a dog.
And a dog. So just saying, it may be that, and air quotes, team for you shifts a little bit. And that's where you get your fulfillment, is from being around those 5 people. That maybe other people took the place of for a while just because of time. So that's a beautiful thing. I love how you have shared your journey with us. I love how, all the questions that I sent you in our pre-work to get ready to have the conversation, you literally have just told us how you are putting yourself in a position to be profitable. And it's not by pushing through, it's by pushing through other things, but taking a step back and then making peace with taking a step back, knowing that it actually could lead closer to the life that you want.
Right. Taking that step back isn't a bad thing. And I do also want to make sure that people understand that even though if I were to put all of this on paper, it looks really bad. It looks dire. It could be completely depressing. However, it's a positive thing. And I'm looking at this as a positive thing because I've learned so much. I've grown so much. I've absorbed a lot. And the worst thing you can get from a bill is a paper cut. It's just a thing. It has to be dealt with. It's just a thing.
And I will say this, looking at it at the beginning and dealing with it when the bills come in when they're low is a much easier thing than waiting and dealing with it when they're high. Right?
Yes. Deal with it.
Deal with it early on. If you don't know your numbers, get in there and figure them out. Find somebody to help you figure them out. I am so impressed with your tenacity. I am completely impressed with your perseverance, with your transparency to share, and to honestly take the pride and sit it aside for a moment and go, you know what, this is just real life. And this is really what happens. And I even told you on the phone, I had worked with designers who were top 40 under 40 and top 30 under 30 and top whatever, who on the outside looking in, we show our highlight reel and everybody thought everything was great. And in the background, they're crumbling and they were in bankruptcy and, they were in dire straits, but that's not what everybody saw. And the hope is not that we go through that, but there is saying that there is life on the other side. There's beauty on the other side. And changing your life to be a laptop life is probably going to give you a better chance to go to Germany than any type of brick and mortar would do for you.
Right. Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Where can we find you? If anybody wants to check in, where can they find you, Richelle?
Well, 3 different places. I have my website, which is Sitzenhaus, Sitzenhaus. That's the German spelling for sit on it, house. You can find me there. You can find me on Facebook, Richelle Plett. I also have an Instagram, which is Richelle Plett. So you can find me there.
Perfect. And I will have all of that in the show notes. And just a reminder that your courses will be available on your website under courses.
Under courses section.
And there are 2 of them. So, my suggestion coming from the workroom background and the interiors background, buy them both. They're going to be helpful. And so I'm so glad that you have that resource available. So thank you again for being with us today, Richelle.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
You're welcome. And let me just remind everybody, we would love to have your reviews on iTunes. We would love to hear from you. Email me your profitability story. And we're going to have a podcast coming up pretty shortly where we'll share some of those. So listen in, respond, share with a friend. Thanks so much.